when we move from the physical body of the five element into the dream body, with the idea that we are not this body, that we are an eternal being, an individual, a mortal Atma, who has descended here into this physical body to have a particular experience. We are much more like this dream body than we are this physical body. Therefore, when we're stepping into that place at night, we're experiencing much more of, in terms of my experience, of who we really are.
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, mystical beings, to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. This is your weekly installment of your inner connection to your outer expression, where I, your host, Harrison, with the beautiful guests I get the pleasure of holding space with, set the intention of holding a powerful container to pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. And today I'm really excited for this conversation. I'm excited for all the conversations that I have, but today it's going to be a powerful one. And I was just sharing with the guest, had trouble sleeping last night because there was so much moving through me. Before I pass to this powerful soul and this powerful guide, just a reminder, beautiful beings, if you get a bit of value out of this chat today, if it brings some things up in you, if it brings some deeper awareness, how you can support the show is by sharing this episode across the podcast universe to your friends, your family, your lovers. You can leave your feedback and reviews on Spotify and Apple reviews in the review section. And remember, you can now join the Cosmic Love Antenna Facebook group and tribe and community over on Facebook. And I would love to see you there. But today on the show, I have the powerful Jason Pickard here with me. Jason is a fellow holistic lifestyle practitioner. He's part of the Czech family. He's a process-oriented, studying within the process-oriented psychology and psychoanalytical realm. He is a powerful healer in his own right, a dreamer of the Dreamtime, a shamanic practitioner, and just a beautiful soul. We're going to get into today the difference and the diving into the dream time and dreaming, where we go within these spaces and places, practices and rituals to create the dream that we desire, mystical and spiritual perspectives, and so much more. Jason, my beautiful friend, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
It is so good to be here. I'm feeling that same energy that you're talking about, just really lifting me up right now.
Yeah. I've noticed it, my friend, on this, it's something about podcasts. I don't know. I'm sure you've experienced it on other shows you've been on. Something about podcasts and the container that we can make across time and space. Like, you're on the other side of the world, I'm here in Australia. That doesn't matter, right? The energy, the container that's created seems to really make the magic occur. Do you resonate with that, my friend?
100%. I mean, what an incredible way that we can now all connect with each other in places that we never would have explored before, teachers that we can meet that we never would have had access to, courses. And it's all about this mood of sharing what we love to do, sharing our own experiences. I think we all love to show our friends or our family, oh, look at this great piece of art I made, or this song I wrote, or this poem I wrote, or this movie I watched. We all love to share. We're sharing beings. And I think in that mood is why podcasting is so enjoyable.
Yeah. And I think another lens to it is that it's mostly voice only, right? Unless you're watching it on YouTube or something like that, it's like 90% the voice. And as I'm sure we'll probably get into today, our voice is one of the aspects of us that help us co-create with the universe, right? When we start to use our voice, we start to, manifest what our heart desires. And when we do that with someone, it's kind of like we're manifesting back and forth together. And that, I think people feel that power depending on what the topic is.
Totally. Yeah. They say in the beginning, there was the word.
Yeah.
And the word was Om.
Yeah.
And so we are beings of frequency and vibration and energy. And we so easily forget that. But when we find that right resonance and we tune into that frequency, it gives us a direct experience experience of what we're looking for. And so if you're listening to a podcast and you're feeling that resonance, it's the frequency that the podcast interviewer and the guest are holding,
Yes.
in which is capturing you.
Yeah. Oh, so many pieces I can jump off there, my friend, but let's go step back a little bit. I want to, for people that don't know who you are, how I like to sort of start these shows is going back a little bit into your past. And I think that the most powerful moment is the moment we're in right now, but our history does help us connect to people that are new to our voices, new to our souls. And how I sort of frame this stepping back a little bit is talking about your pain teachers, my friend, and particularly the biggest one. I would encourage people to go listen. If you're tuning into Jason's voice, go listen to his interview with Mr. Paul Chek on the Living 4Ds podcast. And you detailed your story quite in depth, and it was a very lovely listen. But today, Jason, I'd love to pull out the pain teacher. When you think back at your past and the soul that you are here today in this moment, what is the pain teacher that stands out the most for you, that has really defined, the work that you're doing now, the people that you help, and the love that you bring to the world?
Great. Yeah. So I think my little bit of a biographical summary might illuminate that question. When I was a child, I was living in a sort of a mainstream environment. I didn't have many of these, great teachings and wisdom teachings around us. I was born in Long Island, New York, very kind of mainstream upbringing. My first loves, interestingly, were drumming and magic, but I very quickly moved away from those and started focusing on becoming a good student and this idea of building a resume and getting a great job and going to college and being successful. I went through a very mainstream education. I went to the University of Virginia, which is a wonderful university. I was really focused on going to Wall Street. I was very focused on being a successful financial trader. And by the time I was 26 years old, I was now a portfolio manager at Tudor Investment Corp, working for legendary trader Paul Tudor Jones, who is one of the most famous traders of all time, who became my mentor. So I was 26 years old. I was working for Tudor Investment. I was becoming the youngest portfolio manager, the youngest partner ever at this firm. I was running a $1 billion portfolio. I was ranked as one of the top 30 traders under 30 in the world, but I was 330.
Jason, let me jump in, because I've heard you share the story, and it's magical in so many ways. How does it feel to get to that point? Right. And I was listening to you speak about this on some other episodes, and this was the question that was bubbling up for me. And there's a book, I'm forgetting the name of the author, but there's a book called The Two Mountains. And the two mountains, there's this idea that we all have this idea in us of gaining the heights of this momentous ladder that we want to climb. And then we get there, we find out that, there's another mountain behind it. It's actually of a different kind of nature. So I'm wondering, like, when it seems like at the age of 26, 27, you seem to have ticked off all of those major sort of goals that you have as a human on this planet. When you got there, how did it feel?
Well, that was the paradox for me, was that I achieved this great success, but at the same time, I felt this complete aloneness, this complete smallness. It didn't matter how many private jets I could fly on, how much champagne I was popping or spraying on people. It didn't matter how much money I made or how many accolades I had. It didn't fill me up. And Joseph Campbell talks about, we spend most of our life climbing up the ladder to realize when we get to the top that it's on the wrong wall. It's been on the wrong wall. We've been climbing the wrong ladder the whole time. So this was this big paradox for me, is that here I am on paper, extremely successful, but I felt the complete opposite of that. I felt that no matter how much material wealth and how many accomplishments I actually were able to achieve, nothing actually made me feel that same way. In fact, I felt the complete opposite. It's almost as if I felt smaller and smaller and smaller throughout that process.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jason. And there's parts of me that are really excited to hear you say that, because, while in my history, I haven't had the exponential climb in terms of monetary and physical success that you've had, there have been parts of me that have craved that sort of, superficial reward. Look at me, I did all these things and look at how much I've climbed. But then there's also parts of me that realize that, those are valuable, and they give us insights and lessons, and they help us see parts of us. But there's also this deeper meaning. There's also this deeper space that is wanting to be birthed, in the many ways I'm sure we're going to get to today. So,
and then I'll just comment on that real quick. I don't want to give the impression that throwing away success or throwing away monetary gain is my cup of tea. In some regards, I did sort of push that away a few years ago when I retired from Wall Street to move into being a holistic life coach and healer and teacher and these other therapeutic roles. However, I only found that that's just as much a part of me as this new kind of persona is. And for me, it's about being a bridge between those two worlds. How can we be in the world but not of the world? How can we be in Wall Street but also be working towards a larger vision and goal, and take care of ourselves, take care of our family and the world at the same time? So I think being fluidity and not having rigidity in our roles and in our places in society is very important, because it's not about just pushing that all away. It's about doing both.
Yeah. Well, we could connect it to the idea of shadow work, my friend. I'm sure that you've looked into a lot of this through the psychoanalytical lens that you've done a lot of work in. When we do shadow work, we want to integrate a part of separation back into the whole. The first step of that shadow work is loving acceptance for that part. It's loving awareness. It's loving forgiveness, right? It's not saying that this thing needs to be further away. It's seeing it for the lessons that it did give us and the value that it did give, and now bringing it back into the wholeness to take a step forward together. And I think, I want to highlight this today. I think you have done a beautiful culmination of that in many ways. Let's switch now with that sort of foundation. And I think listeners out there can understand here why I was sort of pulled to this beautiful soul's work and what he does in the world. And I wanted to make the theme of this episode the dreaming and the dreamtime, and creating our dream reality through not just what we are doing in this waking state, but also where we go to at night when we sleep. So I guess where I want to start here, my friend, I would love to get your perspective on what is the difference between the dreaming and the dream time, which we're experiencing right now as we create this podcast, and the space that we go when we go to sleep. What is your opinion and perspective?
Yeah, my opinion is that it's all important and really much of the same. When we're dreaming at night, we're experiencing without the filter of our primary identity or our ego that is blocking these experiences, sort of like going into a shamanic journey. Your ego is disabled, where now you can see the truth that's around you. That's sort of like what's happening at night. However, that same process is happening all the time. So we have the nighttime dreaming, we have our living dream, and we also have these things that are happening, such as daytime dreaming, which are various flirts and synchronicities and flickering experiences and body symptoms and gestures. So spontaneous movements even. So we realize that there's a continual dreaming process that's just happening all the time. You don't have to go to sleep at night to dream. You can step into this at any time. And this is the work that I'm studying in process-oriented psychology through Arnie Mandel's work, that this dreaming process is an endless source of creativity. And anytime that you can just catch the tail of it, it's the beginning of evolving yourself to your wholeness, the tail of catching a creative process. So dreaming is the birthright of everyone, not just to those who think they're artistic or come from a particular culture. And Arnie Mindell talks about marginalizing dreaming is one of the greatest ways to get what he calls a mild chronic depression, where you feel this sort of flatness in life, that there's really no purpose or oomph behind what you're doing. You just wake up, you go to your job. You might not be clinically depressed, but you just don't feel that life has this great enthusiasm. And so one of the greatest ways to get into that rut is by marginalizing your dreaming process. That's just not only your nighttime dreams, but that's when you were in elementary school, looking out the window, daydreaming and looking out at a tree or a bird, and the teacher goes, "Pay attention, look back inside." Instead of saying, being curious about what are you following, amplify that. Maybe we need to move the class outside. Maybe you need to be in nature. Maybe we need to move like a tree right now to get to the essence of what's actually unfolding. So really awakening to the fact that everything around us is part of a dream. Everything around us has a symbolic meaning for us and is really interacting with us and guiding us into our wholeness to awaken to our full potential.
What an answer, my friend. I knew that question would be a very powerful start to this deep dive of the things that I know we can share together. And so a couple of things bubbled up here, more than a couple, but I'll try and narrow it down. First of all, that disconnection that you spoke of, I don't want to say numbing, but sort of the disconnection from our waking dream that we all deserve to lean into, the creation energy that we all have, and the forgetfulness that we actually have that creation energy. I look at the world at the moment, myself included, for a long time, and maybe you too. So when, on that rise up through the finance world that you lived in, but there are so many systems, big systems in the world at large that create a kind of person that by default they are disconnected from that creation energy, or disconnected from that ability to dream the dream that they deserve to dream. But the flip side to it, and this is, this might be controversial to say, this is why I'm really grateful for what happened with COVID and the pandemic. The pandemic, for a lot of people, myself included, was a wake-up call, right? It was a great awakening and a remembering to the creation energy that has been there the whole time for a lot of us. I myself, a big part of my business was created in the pandemic time because of some of the parts of me that were awakened due to the pain that was initially caused from the isolation, the lockdown, all the things. So I'm wondering, and this is not on my questions, my friend, but this has just bubbled up. What do you think that the pandemic and, maybe let's go beyond the pandemic, just large collective events, how do they play a role in helping people dream a bigger dream?
Well, large collective events show us all of our connectivity, in that we are all in this relational field, right? As a therapist, when I'm working with a client, I'm realizing that there is myself, there's the client, but there's also a shared field. There's a shared process that we're working on, where so many times I go into a session and the same thing my client's working on is a shade of the same process that I'm going through. And this is the same thing with the entire world, right? The same thing that's happening on the outer is happening on the inner, as above, so below, as without, so within. So we're all a part of this entire larger field of connectivity. And that's why working on yourself is the most important thing you can do, because you're connected to all there is. So at the same time, as we're connecting and we're working on our shadows, and we're resourcing, and we're learning the lessons of the pain teacher, and we integrate that, we're having an effect on the larger field. There's quantum physics has shown us through non-locality and through various different experiments, and this goes all the way back to the Vedas and historical scriptures, that while we are all distinctive and individual, we are also connected, and we are all sharing a dream as well as having our own individual dreams as well. So when you think about the pandemic, it's not there's really no such thing as good and bad, right? Good is God with two O's, which means nothing. If you ask 100 people what God means, they'll all give you a different answer. And bad is a term that was originally comes from badling, and badling being somebody that's born with two genitals, both female and male parts. It's not bad. It's just descriptive term for having sort of an abnormality in your biological being. But we've forgotten that everything in consciousness comes from polarity. They say that the church shined a light so bright on Jesus that they paradoxically had to create the devil. So, the same pain that we're all going through in COVID is offering the same opportunity to resource and to awaken to our full potential. So I think we all have realized that we need to take better care of the earth. We need to take better care of ourselves, and so forth, right? And so for me, one of the things that this is calling into us is calling us to move from childhood to adulthood. How many of us are just downloading the given story from authorities and just taking it verbatim, versus having to stand up and say, I need to think for myself. I need to become an adult. I need to make my own choices, and I need to decide what's right for me and what's right for the planet. So we're all experiencing this together, and we're all breathing the same air. We're all drinking the same water. We're all eating the same food. We're all living here on the same planet, flying through space at inconceivable speeds. So there's no way to disconnect you from me, right?
Yeah. And I thank you for breaking that down, my friend. Just for people listening, if you're getting triggered by some of Jason's words, I would highly encourage you, as I always do on this podcast, to don't turn off this episode. Don't step back. Don't, pretend this doesn't exist. I would lovingly invite you to sit with the emotions that are coming up, because Jason speaks a lot of truth right here with that, especially with all of what he said, but specifically with the impetus for us as individuals and a collective, but starting with us as individuals to really step into our power and grow out of that being that, for me, for example, I grew up in an education system that taught me what to think, not how to think. And that led me into my teens and early adulthood, sort of always seeking external power, forces, people, places, and things to tell me what to do. And I heavily relate, and I felt parts of me being triggered with what Jason was saying. But those parts, much like we were talking about before with the shadow, we need to hold space for them. We need to accept them. We need to invite them back into the whole so we can take a step forward together. Jason, I want to take a step back to something you said before, because I don't want to miss this part, and I want to get your perspective on this. You talked about how, and the place that we go to at night when we dream, when we have nighttime dreaming, our ego sort of takes a step back, and much like a plant ceremony, our default mode network, which is very much a part of the ecosystem, is sort of on rest. So what happens now is sort of our spiritual essence can run wild in the Dreamtime space. My question for you is, how can we learn to cultivate more of this spiritual connection, especially in the Dreamtime state? Because I have a lot of people that come to me, just to give this example, a lot of clients coming to me asking me not just how to break down the dreams and the meaning behind them, but how can we lean into more things of the spiritual nature while we dream? So, past lives, going back to different planets that we've lived on, things like that. What comes up for you around this?
Well, there's a lot there. First, I've learned from my teacher, Jeffrey Armstrong Kavindra Rishi, who is a scholar on the English language as well as Sanskrit, that spirituality means to breathe. So when we say we're on the spiritual path, we're really only saying that we're breathing. So that really needs to be defined a little bit better in terms of being on this path of yoga or this path of individuation or dharma. And the same thing with ego. Ego really means a sense of I-ness. but we don't have these words in English to really describe them. So in the Vedas, they talk about first being ahamkara, which means I'm identifying with this physical body. Ahamkara being the 5-element body, going from the most dense earth to water to fire to air to space or akash. And then we move into what's called the dream body or the anti-karana, the karana being our physical body and this vehicle that we're driving, and moving into the anti-karana, which is the dream body, which is the manas faculties, or thinking, feeling, willing, and memory, our buddhi, or our ability to have discernment. And then finally, this most subtle layer that comes over us, the hamkara, where we identify ourselves as this physical body. But when we move from the physical body of the 5-element into the dream body, with the idea that we are not this body, that we are an eternal being, an individual, a mortal Atma, who has descended here into this physical body to have a particular experience, we are much more like this dream body than we are this physical body. Therefore, when we're stepping into that place at night, we're experiencing much more of, in terms of my experience, of who we really are. And the best way to really explore this, I would say, is through the daytime, interestingly. So having a relationship where you're walking down the street and all of a sudden a red flower or an animal or a person or an experience catches you. That's your dreaming faculty, literally your environment dreaming you up in relationship to awaken you to something. And so just by following those flirts to say, okay, what is about it that I'm noticing? Why am I noticing this particular person or this particular flower or this particular color? And following that and unfolding that is the greatest way to step into it. There's a million ways to analyze dreams at night. There's a million ways to step into this dreaming process. And none of them are better than any other ones. So there's a million techniques we can go to, but just the idea of participating and living in a dream and awakening to that unfolding, for me, is the first step. And that brings a lot of magic and mystery to your life, because all of a sudden life becomes purposeful, where things that are unfolding around you are happening for you instead of just mechanically or against you.
Yeah. I'm hearing a lot. That was, again, a beautiful breakdown, my friend. I'm hearing a lot of, and we talked about this before, really this illusion of separation and disconnection between not just us and other people, but as we're talking about here, the environment, and not only a illusion of separation, but this beautiful microcosm of the macrocosm, right? As you gave the beautiful image of this dreamtime state and spirituality as the breath. And I would take that a step further, my friend. I don't know. Have you spent much time with Joe Rushton in the Czech family? So,
I of course know of her. I haven't had the opportunity of really spending time with her personally. So
I'm doing a mystery school with her at the moment, and it is about connecting into more of my spiritual abilities and a spiritual nature of life. But within that mystery school, we're learning about this idea of channeling and connecting into our spirits and all of these beautiful things. Yep. And one of the images that we were sharing in the course a couple of weeks ago was that breath that you just spoke about. We could actually take it even further back and say that is really how God and oneness expresses all of the individuals, right? So whatever people listening out there, and this is what I want to get your perspective on, sir, see how this matches into everything that you're saying. Whatever your perspective is on a higher power, whether it's Allah, whether it's God, consciousness, the field, the one mind, the thing that they all have in common is it's a oneness, it's a one source. And that one source expresses out into all the beautiful, unique expressions that we are. And that is where you can connect the breath. God breathes out and creates all of the expressions, but then God breathes in with all of the experiences that those expressions have moved through. How does that fit into what you're saying? Well,
I think it's sort of a yes and, right? So you have if you can imagine the metaphor of a movie projector shining a movie onto a wall, we're sitting there in the movie theater, looking at the wall and thinking that that is the image. So we just keep running into the wall and running into the wall and running into the wall. And we say, okay, this wall, this image is not the object. And that's Buddhism, really. That's na-iti. I am not this wall. I am not this image. And that's sort of the emptiness camp. So then we turn around and we see that this is all coming from a projector. So we move towards the light, and all of a sudden we're right into the light, and the light is so bright that we're just completely blinded. And then we kind of turn around and realize that that light that's shining onto the wall is made up of hundreds and thousands of individual rays, almost like rays of the sun. And that is our individuality emanating from that oneness. So it's easy to say, yeah, it's all oneness, but that throws away the individuality and the importance of our responsibility to be ourselves. So my answer is it's a yes and. And the interesting part is that if you move through the projector into the film room, you see that there's a film being projected that actually took place somewhere else. There's a director, there are actors, there's all of these people that, somewhere else this happened. So this is almost like a projection of a virtual reality into where we are. So there's all these different ways to look at it. Yes, there is oneness. Yes, and what I've learned from Jeffrey Armstrong is that we do all emanate from the same place, and in our essential nature, we are the same. Yet we are also individuals.
Yes.
Distinctions and differences are real.
Yeah.
And we're also the same.
Yeah. I think this is also where the power and the universal law of free will comes in too, right? We have that free will choice to make those beautiful individualized expressions and choices within it. I love that analogy of the projector. I haven't heard that before. My friend, I want to take this in another direction now, still within this sort of dreaming sort of system. And I want to sort of share my experience here and then get your perspective on this. When it comes to our dreaming and creating the world that we want, creating the goals, the passion, the life that we deserve through our dreaming, whether it in this daytime, dreamtime, dreaming, or at night in our dreams, one of the challenges that I feel I've definitely faced and other people have in the world is the externalization of the self, meaning that we go outwards and project our desire, our dream, our goals, our value on outside things, people, places, and things. So for me, for a long time, it was substances, alcohol, drugs, and traveling, women, all these things. And there are parts of me that, and we talked about this at the beginning of our chat, that hold guilt and shame for those choices. And that when I was in that act, in that experience, I wasn't being spiritual. I wasn't connecting into the dream time. But I recently read a book that I'm sure you've read, my friend, The Shaman's Body by Arnold Mindell. And in there, he talks about, and this really illuminated me, and this is what I want to get your perspective on. He shared the experience of the natives of Australia, and I'm sure this is a global phenomena, but he gave the example of the natives in Australia who succumbed to substance abuse. But he talked to I think it was an elder, and he was explaining that even in that substance abuse, there was a part of them that was still seeking this higher dreamtime spiritual connection, even though from the outside it looks like we can project that person's just abusing a substance. So I'm wondering what bubbles up for you around this idea of the externalization of the self, substance abuse, and its connection to the dreamtime and the dreaming that we all have.
Great. Yeah. So
that was a lot.
No, it's good. This is the same thing that happened to the Native Americans in the United States. you take people who are living in reciprocity with the land, who have a connection to spirit and a greater purpose for life, and you come in and you just denigrate all of their ways of living. You take them off of the land, and now you're putting them from circular based teepees into rectangular buildings, and you're stripping them of their culture. You're teaching them a different kind of education. You're doing all these various things. And ultimately, you see that what arises is addiction. And this addiction, for example, if we think about alcohol addiction, alcohol is called spirits. But what's really happening is we've lost our connection to the big spirit, capital S, right? It's this sort of numbing or this pacifying of really a deeper longing to connect to something greater. So when you come in and you take away the culture, you take away the way of living for various groups, it's not a surprise that what slips in is addiction. And that addiction in Arnie Mandel's work is really another part of the dreaming process. In fact, it can be looked at as an ally, because underneath that addiction is something that is trying to awaken you back to your wholeness and to your connection. Yeah. And, Angelos Aaron, thank you. Yeah. I mean, it is powerful. And, Angelos Arian, speaking of addiction, was a wonderful mentor of mine. I never met her. Hasn't been alive since I've looked into this stuff, but I just felt this very deep connection to her, which it's hard to explain. But she went around the world and she studied various cultures and found that there are 4 universal categories or types of addictions and where these come from. The first one was an addiction to intensity. So there's this fear of being dull, boring routine. And, in that one, there's this passionate heart that is waiting to be claimed. There's an addiction to being fixated on what's not working. And what's waiting to be claimed there is this gift of vision, focusing on what is working or shape-shifting your experience. There's an addiction to the need to know and control. And what's waiting to be claimed there is trust and patience and wisdom. And finally, an addiction to perfection, not tolerating mistakes. We dehumanize ourselves and others. And what we can claim through that is a commitment to excellence in action, as Dr. Karim says from biogeometry. So underneath these addictions is really a part of ourselves dreaming us up to reestablish our connection to our larger life myth and purpose and wholeness.
Yeah. So thank you for outlining that and those 4 aspects of the addiction. I've heard Paul speak about that a lot too. So it's nice to hear your beautiful perspective on that. And it hit me differently. That foundational point there that you elucidated on is that those addictions, there's still a part of us that is craving and moving towards that higher dreamtime state. And why I wanted you to break that down is to really help listeners out there that might have hold that guilt and shame around, like I did for a long time, around those past choices that we did make, maybe in the throw of an addiction, to help yourself forgive, right? Because what Jason just highlighted, right? I felt it moving through me. Moving through me and helping the parts of me to finally let go, right? Of the judgment, of the shame, of the belief systems projected on the choices we made in that throw of addiction. Once we can understand, once we can give ourselves a bit of love around it, right? That's really where healing starts to begin, right? And maybe we can see which of those 4 aspects of the addiction we fall into.
Yeah, and how else can you help anyone else without having experienced it yourself?
Yeah.
Speaking of the shaman's body, Arnie Mandel talks about this concept that Castaneda brings up from all the Don Juan novels about a petty tyrant. So they say, Don Juan says, my benefactor used to say that a warrior who stumbles on a petty tyrant is a lucky one. So a petty tyrant is a person who causes distress by imposing his or her will on others, using psychological pressure. So I don't know, for me, I had a really tough football coach when I was growing up, or, a tough teacher, or, these different things in life that we meet, where we meet oppression and we meet this resistance, right? These petty tyrants, these button pushers, these people that can throw us off balance are really our most effective teachers, because they force us to closely monitor our own reactions and our habitual behaviors, and really, not only stand up to them, but find our way through them and get resiliency and more knowledge on this path. So, addictions, bad dreams that we say, or difficult people in our life that we're in conflict with, all of these things are part of our own dreaming process in order to awaken us to becoming more whole ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And the example I would give within the dream, and because you just hit on it very briefly there, the example I would give for people that have listened to my show before, me talking about nighttime dreams and lucid dreaming, look at nightmares. Nightmares that we have also fall into that category of what you're just describing. They're such beautiful teachers, right? The key to moving through a nightmare is to not keep running away from the thing that you're moving from, the scary dog, the creature, the man. It's to actually turn and face it with love and acceptance. And when you do that, the scary figure transforms into something you're meant to see. It's an aspect of self that, for whatever reason, unconsciously you're probably shifting from.
I love to just say two things on that real quick.
Yeah.
One is, yes, you're right. Maybe it's that you need to become that dog.
Yeah.
Where do you need a little bit more bark in your life? Where do you need a little bit more of that primal energy? So we look at these things as good and bad. Oh, that was a bad, scary dream, but we're the one producing it. It's the same way as that if we take a psychedelic medicine and we said, oh, I had a really bad trip, but all that's happening is we're seeing what's lying underneath the surface of our own psyche. The drug or the molecule we're taking is not programmed with this horror movie to show us. It's just showing us what's already there and buried. So yeah, I always laugh when people come to me and say, oh, I had a really scary dream or I had a nightmare. To me, it's just, that's your own psyche bringing a level of intensity to really wake you up to this point that you need to look at this.
Yeah. Beautiful, my friend. I hit that point all the time, and it was nice to hear you emphasize that. I hope people are listening that hear me talk about dreams all the time. That point, and this is not a dream thing either. This is not just a dream thing. I was having the same conversation about money yesterday, right? And how people will look at, I was sort of coaching someone around money mindset, and how, if we look at our bank account and we say that bank account, oh, I feel it's my money, my numbers in my bank account are making me feel guilty or fearful or sad or shameful or whatever. It's not the money. Whenever we look at our money and we feel a sense of emotion, the money's not giving us that emotion, that feeling, that sensation. The money is just reflecting back to us what's been there the whole time. That's exactly what you're talking about with the dream space. Jason, I want to shift here now to another big topic within this dreaming aspects and this dream time, and it's the role of music and the role of instruments and using shamanic practices within the music perspective to amplify and bring us closer into the awarenesses around the dream time and around dreaming in general. So I guess where I want to start with this, and we're going to go a bit deeper here, and we'll finish the show today with an expression of some of your beautiful music and the things moving through you. Let's start simple. Where do you think music, drumming, rattling, singing plays a role within this Dreamtime conversation that we've been having today?
Yeah, thank you. Well, the drum is the heartbeat of our ancestors. It's the heartbeat of our soul. It's the heartbeat of Mother Earth. It's our mother's heartbeat. It's the first instrument we heard in the womb. We heard the bum, 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 bum. We heard the drum before we heard anything. So it takes us back to our most primal nature and to a connection to our lineage and our reason for being here and to who we really are. So there are 4 key directions that are used in shamanic culture. There's the north, the south, east, and west, obviously. There's also the center, and then there's the non-cardinal directions like northeast. And, you can break it down a million times. But if we're sticking with the 4 key directions, each one of those is representing a particular kind of energy. So in the east, with the morning sun, you have the rattle. The first instrument we hear after we're born is the rattle, right? You give a baby a rattle, and this is this awakening. And you move into the south, and the south is the level of healing, and we have the drum. In the west, we have this idea of our ancestors and dancing and the great mystery. And the shamanic cultures use the foot rattles or the clapsticks. And in the north, we use the flute or the bells. And so each one of these instruments represents a particular kind of medicine based on a particular kind of energy and in a larger framework. And so they're used as tools to awaken and harmonize various aspects of ourself. So if you're singing a song for the West, which is more about the physical body, more, the season, the fall, it's about storing and holding and grounding. It's honoring the 4-legged ones and our inner teacher. It's dancing, meditation. It's about purpose and imagination. And, this list goes on. You would use a particular kind of beat, a 3-beat, instead of a 4-beat or a 2-beat. And you might use a foot rattle or a clapstick in your song. And so each one of these directions has particular components of them that represent that energy in nature. And there's instruments that go with them. So, the drum, the flute, the rattle, the foot rattles, dancing, singing, sitting in meditation, being in ceremony. This is as ancient as human.
Yeah. And it's an amplification in many ways. I would encourage people to go back and listen to the episode I did with Mr. Martin on shamanic journeys beyond time and space. And we talked about these 4 directions within, any kind of medicine journey or ceremony, shamanic journey that we can take. And I think a big part of it, my friend, and maybe this resonates with you, it's connected to these primal archetypes that are inside of us that move through us through generation and incarnation, that are just waiting to be embodied at certain points. And when we start to rattle, when we start to drum, when we start to dance, and I want to get back to singing in a second, it awakens, right? And I know that within archetype work that I'm sure you've done a lot of, sometimes many of us are within an internal archetype that is not serving us anymore, right? We've such as the archetype of the mother or the teacher or the father or the archetypes aren't good or bad. They serve a role. They help us manifest something, but then we need to be able to see where we need to step out of it into a new one. And I feel that the music, the drums, the rattle, the flute, it awakens maybe an archetype that we haven't created space for yet that needs to manifest. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, totally. I think this would be a very long conversation, but ultimately, if you think about the reason to do any kind of ritual is to connect us to these purposeful laws of nature or this archetypal realm. Before you can create a cup, you have to have the idea of the cup, right? So when we're looking around and we're looking at the trees that are in relationship with us, where they're giving off oxygen and we're giving off CO2, and how the water and the sun is feeding all of this. And, the water comes down into the river and then it goes back up into the sky and it's being cleansed. We are all in this reciprocal relationship with everything around us. And this archetypal realm, in the Vedas, they call it the Devas, is the blueprint stage. It's the realm of ideas. Everything that's brought into nature has to come from this place, right? We didn't make the trees. What was the intelligence that made this human body? What was the intelligence that is breathing me right now as I'm trying to figure out what to say to you? What's the intelligence that's beating my heart, that's digesting my lunch, right? So, all of this exists on this blueprint realm, this ideation level that is making our trees, it's making our planets, it's making our galaxies. And all of that is bringing everything into nature and into matter, right? So there's a lot more I could say about that, but ultimately, yes. And Anytime we're connecting with any of these instruments, anytime we're doing purposeful rituals, it's to connect us to this archetypal realm. And you're right, these 4 directions are representing archetypal energies of which make all of creation. And they're sort of, personified laws of nature.
Yeah. Jason, I'm really enjoying this chat, my friend. I can feel your passion. I can feel this love moving through you that you were just speaking about, that, as you said, trying to have this chat and move it through. It's less of a trying and more of an allowing. And I can really feel the dreaming that we're creating in this podcast. So I appreciate and I'm grateful for you, my friend. I want to share a perspective with you. I want to get one more sort of understanding from you before I shift into, I want you to share some of your beautiful drumming and music with the audience listening. But before we get to that, an experience I had a couple of years ago now that I want to get your take on. Much like I think many of the people listening, we first step our toes into this bigger dreaming reality through relationships with beautiful plant medicines in many different forms out there in the world. And I want to be very clear with my words. Plant medicines aren't the only way to enter this dreaming reality. There are many, many doors to the same space and place. But for me, it was very heavy in my journey. And I was having one particular experience, and this beautiful guide who was holding space for me during the ebbs and flows of God and love moving through me, and awareness and deeper shadows coming up and all the stuff that comes up in these kinds of experiences. She was singing to me. She was taking the space and place within sort of Central and South American cultures of the Ikaru. And she was sharing these Ikarus and these songs with me. And I noticed within the experience, as I was moving through my pain and my trauma, and I was crying, and I was accepting my shadows, all the stuff, I noticed that what the music was doing, it was allowing me to lovingly surrender and flow and let go into some of the things that I usually would have moved away from and suppressed and ignored. And, as Joseph Campbell says, that the treasure is in the cave that we fear to enter. The Ikaru allowed me to enter that cave. I'm wondering, what is your perspective on this? How does this play a role? What comes up?
Yeah, I'd like to just share a quick story on that. A few years ago, around February 2020, my wife and I were going to go down to Soltera, an ayahuasca center in Costa Rica, to have a group experience. And after we booked the trip, she became pregnant with my third child, Kidra, who's now 2 years old. And so we called down to Soltera and said, I don't think we can probably come on this trip because Kara's pregnant with our child. And, I don't think it's appropriate for a pregnant woman to, obviously be doing ayahuasca or sitting in ceremony or anything like that. And they said, well, let us talk to the Shipibo shamans, the maestros, the maestro, and ask them what they think about it. I said, okay. So they called me back a few days later and they said, look, the shaman said, in our culture, historically, the only people that actually took the medicine were the shamans themselves. And in fact, the medicine is actually the Icaros, or the music. And it's only in modern day did people start taking the medicine in the group, which ultimately just opens you up so the Icaros can go in. So we actually decided to go down and do the ceremony. And I wound up doing 4 days of ceremony. And my wife sat in on the experience and had the experience without the medicine. And for both of us, it was completely profound and very powerful. And the music being sung to my unborn child was so moving to me that it would be kind of a long story, but almost ripped me apart in that moment. That the power behind them just having that purity and that direct initiation right down to the Atma of my child sitting in ceremony. So I totally agree with you. In a ceremony like that with a trained shaman, the music is really doing the healing. The way it will move inside of you, create an emotion or a feeling or a purging before even your mind can even think about what's happening. It's just this instant connection where you can just see it taking shape inside of your own being. And until you've had that experience, it's quite mind-boggling. So music is medicine. The Native Americans say, sing for your life. Sing for your life. It's really, if you can talk, you can sing. If you can walk, you can dance. So these are the essential things of living. Music, vibration, joy. That's medicine. Music is medicine.
So profound, my friend. I already found my little snippet for the start of this episode. That was beautiful, sir. And I think that leads us perfectly into what you're about to share. But I just want to reiterate this point for anyone listening, and you feel like you want to connect to the dreaming, and you see a lot of people around you doing plant medicines, and you feel like that is the role to take, that is the step to take. Listen to your heart and follow it if you feel called. But I also want you to know that you don't have to take that step, right? Know that there are many other ways, as Jason just highlighted with music, whether it's someone holding sacred space for you, to enter that same realm without needing to indulge in the medicines themselves, right? There's options out there for you. And this realm that we enter, there are many doors to the same space and place. Jason.
And I just like to say one thing on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
If you do decide to go down the medicine path or the plant medicine path, and by no means am I promoting that for everybody, it's been powerful for me. But ultimately, if you don't realize that the point is to allow it to open you up to what already exists all around you, and then integrate that back into your life. If you're just going journey after journey after journey, it's just becoming a party, a recreational thing. This is a shamanic journey. It's an experience to learn, really to ultimately connect to those laws of nature that we talked about, connecting to this larger part of ourselves, to see how we're part of this larger wheel of life, and we're a part of this huge reciprocal cycle that is way more connected than we could ever imagine. And then to live in that way. But most people actually just go down, blow their head off metaphorically with a large dose, come back, and 2 to 3 weeks later, they're just back to their regular old life and consensus reality, in a mild chronic depression. So it's very important about this in a mindful way, where you have an appropriate guide, appropriate teacher. You're very methodical about the reasons why you're doing it. You've done all of the prep work, the inner work, the dieting, the art, the meditation. You're in alignment with all of that. And then you have a very serious integration process back, where you can say, what did I learn from this experience? And how can I use this to improve my life and those around me?
Yeah, so important. The integration, again, this goes back to the externalization of the self before. We're so busy, even in these plant medicine ceremonies, looking to the next thing. So we do it, and I'm like, okay, done it, ticked it off, had the experience, got the awareness, heard the Icarus, went to Costa Rica, and now let's move on to the next thing. But if we aren't working in as much as the working out of the experience itself, then that balance isn't obtained.
Native Americans say a year and a day. A year and a day from your plant ceremony to the next. A year and a day to really integrate everything that you've learned, so you can walk away and really embody that, or you're just jumping from experience to experience, and you're really just wasting a bunch of medicine. Just to say one thing about Angela Sarian, she says, you can learn a lot in the fast lane, but you need to move into the slow lane to integrate. And so, we could go speed in the fast lane and go do a plant ceremony, but we really need to move over to the right lane, or the left lane, I guess, depending on what country you're in, but move into the slow lane and really slow down and integrate it and see how this can work for us in our life. Yeah.
If you're listening to this again, if this is another trigger point for you, really sit with this. And this is where I think, and I agree with this, where people come to me sometimes and they say, how can plant medicines be a part of the spiritual practice? And I think this is where this beautiful medicine does tiptoe over to the other side of being a challenge, when we don't do these steps that Jason is beautifully highlighting, when we don't take the awareness, take the attention, take the integration and the love. Jason, I want to now sort of transition into what you were beautifully saying before about this music allowing us to open the gateway. And I want to before we finish off this podcast here with my final question for you, I want to now give you the opportunity to share with the beautiful listeners who have been connecting to your voice today a bit of your own music, a bit of your own beautiful voice. And we talked about you sharing maybe some drumming, maybe some music that might be coming up for you. So I'd love to give you the mic now, my friend, to share anything you would like to share.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. You kind of, well, you didn't spring it on me, but you sort of did in a way. So I'm letting it kind of spontaneously come up. But one of the things I think might be useful is if I just lead everybody in with this very simple meditation called the Ishtaba breath that I learned from White Eagle Medicine Woman, and then allowing that to take you deeper into your heart. And I will sing a Native American Vision Quest song for 1 or 2 rounds, and just allow this song to see what you can call forward in your dreaming in your life at this moment. So we'll start with the heartbeat rhythm as we discussed, and then you'll just hear my voice and a little bit of singing. So focusing your attention on your heart, dropping into your heart space, and breathing from the right side of your heart to the left, and from the left to the right, and breathing from the bottom of your heart to the top, and the top of your heart to the bottom, and breathing from the front of your heart to the back, and from the back of your heart to the front. Now breathing from your heart all the way up to your crown, top of your head, and from your crown down to your feet, and from your feet back to your heart. Way high oh, way oh hey, way high ho, way oh hey, way high ho, way oh hey, way high ho, way, ya hey, ya hey, ya hey, ya ho, ya hey, ya hey, ya hey, ya ho, ya hey, ya hey, ya hey, ya ho, ya hey, ya hey, hey, ya ho, way high ho, way oh hey, way high ho, way oh hey, way high ho, way oh hey, way high ho, way, ya hey, ya hey, ya hey, ya ho, ya hey, ya hey, ya hey, ya ho, ya hey, ya hey, ya hey, ya ho, ya hey, ya hey, hey, ya ho.
That was beautiful, my friend. It's funny. I dropped in, and as you were setting up the drumming, there was a lot of tightness around my shoulders, and I felt very rigid. I felt, tight. I felt there was a lot of thoughts moving through me. And then as I started focusing on that beautiful breath and the crown and the root with the heart, and then you started singing. Immediately as your voice hit, my shoulders dropped. Like there was an actual, there was a physical. It wasn't like an energetic. It was an energetic drop, but it was like my shoulders literally just went like this, and I loved it. Thank you for sharing that, my friend. And I think it really shows that singing element that you were talking about before, and what it can allow us to surrender into, but mostly let go of. For me, and I'll just share this transparently here, when I do these podcasts, there's a lot of things moving through me, not just things that I want to flow and share with people like you and the guest and the people listening, but, timing and making sure that I'm respectful of your time and my time. And when that music hit me, all of those beliefs, all of those worries, all of those thoughts, they didn't become irrelevant, but the tension and the tightness that were holding on to me, they left. So thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for that experience.
Paying attention to those little body experiences and those emotions, that's part of that dreaming process. So it's very good that you're aware of that. And instead of pushing that away, one can notice that in their awareness and explore those feelings. So, I'm all about going over our edges, right? Our edges are these things that say, oh, we can't do this. A man has to be like this, or a woman has to be like that, or I can't sing in public, or I can't do that. And ultimately, experiencing inside of myself, yes, I'm a little bit nervous to sing on this podcast, or, I didn't really warm up my voice or this or whatever, but then really just moving through that and just expressing yourself and going for it. That's what, I think brings a lot of juice to life. It's stepping into our wholeness by becoming more than we think we are, right? It's about dancing like no one's watching. It's like singing like you're in the shower by yourself, and just not caring and really embodying that makes us really individuate into more whole and enlivened people.
Yeah. If you've listened to this whole episode thus far, beautiful beings out there in the podcast world, where can you take what Jason just said and implement that into your life, right? What is the thing in your relationship with your partner? What is the thing in your business? What is the thing in your health that you can do what he just said, right? Surrender into, find that edge and, move beyond it and ask yourself, how can I express that? Jason, I've loved this chat, and it's been a fun little roller coaster here today. Before I get to the last question and we finish up here, I want to give you the opportunity now. I know that you're sort of stepping back out into the world now with your gifts, your abilities, the things that you're sharing with the world. If my listeners have really connected to your beautiful message and your voice today, and they want to connect to you, what offerings, your website, what do you want to share with everyone?
Yeah, the simplest way is just to go to my website, jasonpickard.org. I'm sure you'll list it in the show notes, and you can connect with me there. You can read a little bit more about me, and you could email me, and I'd be happy to chat with you.
Yeah, I love it. And as always, beautiful souls, click the details of the episode in Spotify or Apple, wherever you're listening to this, and you'll see all of Jason's beautiful resources, websites, and ways to connect to him. My friend, the last question I have here for you today, and I'm already predicting we could do an episode just on this in itself. But the theme of this podcast, the intention is to really get to the deeper definitions of what love is in this world, right? Love, as I define it, is really this deeper mystical embodiment of love that is inside and outside of us. So I'm wondering, sir, how do you personally define that love word yourself?
Well, this is quite a long topic, to be honest. There are many different answers, right? Paul Chek quotes love as being the flow of energy and information to empathetic and compassionate flow of energy information between two people to self or other. He also has the love model, which is L being life or desire, 0 being full potential, and VE standing for volt electron or will. But for me, the important thing to ask is, ask yourself, why is there so much beauty all around me? Why am I so hopelessly attracted to all this beauty? And why can't we keep it, right? If you go back to my original story, I had all of this material stuff, but why did that feel so empty, right? Maybe we can have it for a minute, a year, 20 years, 50 years, but ultimately it fades, and it seems like, it was just like that. So we're all attracted by this force, and it's the most powerful force on the planet, right? So we're asking these questions: how can we hold on to this. And so in English, we use the word love. And that's not a very descriptive word. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Anchorman, but yeah, it reminds me of this thing, this part where Ron Burgundy is screaming out, "I love Veronica," and he's screaming at the top of his lungs. And they go back and they're saying, one of the guys is saying, "Ron, tell us what love is like." And he says, "Well, it's really hard to explain." And someone's saying, "Oh, I've been in love once." And Ron says, "Well, what was her name?" And he goes, "I don't remember." He goes, "I don't think that's really love, right?" And then you have the other character saying, "I love lamp, I love this, I love that." So we really do say that. We really say, "Oh, I love my job, I love my daughter, I love my grandma, I love this, I love pizza." But in the Vedas, they have these rasas, or these tastes of love, right? So there's all of these different kinds of love. There's the Shanta rasa, where it's like the love you have with a pet. There's an intimacy, but it's across species, right? Yeah. Then there's this dasyam. There's this love of being in service. So it's this part of service that's rewarding and fulfilling. And, you could be serving a great figure that's really supporting the world, or you could be serving, an intimate partner. You could be serving great spirit. There's friendship. There's the love between two best friends, somebody that you would tell your most intimate secrets to, that you give the keys to your house. There's the love that you have with a baby, right? And then there's this intimate love as well. And there's a lot of different things we can go into here, but for the sake of time, we'll just say that this is the ultimate question, is that how can we find this everlasting beauty in this world that seems so temporary when it comes to these kinds of things? And it really is exploring these relationships in a loving, fresh way. And it's realizing that ultimately we need to turn from outside to inside. That having this relationship with this archetypal realm, having this relationship with spirit, and having this relationship with ourselves, and having these different kinds of rasas, or these tastes or flavors or dances that we're in life, that's how we ultimately experience and find these things. It's not a one size fits all, or a one flavor, only vanilla ice cream kind of thing. And this would be an entire podcast, but
no, I think it's beautiful. It was.
Yeah.
It really was, my friend. And welcome to this podcast. Welcome to why I sort of felt the pull to really connect into this word, not just through the teachings within the Czech Institute, that breakdown that you gave with the love, LOVE, but there's just to add my quick reflection here, those beautiful nuances and those unique expressions of the love between the different kinds. For me, it's not a matter of adding on of this love. It's a pulling back of the layers of that love that's been there the whole time, right? And the question that it comes up through that is, what are those layers, right? And for many of us, it's a lot of what we've talked about today. We know, whether it be through the collective events, whether it be through the things that we don't put in or are toxically putting in our body, through our unconscious traumas, all these things. So yeah, well, I might have to have you back, my friend, and we can do an episode just on that 4-letter word. I love you very much, sir. Thank you for spending time with me today. Thank you for sharing your love with everyone listening. Beautiful souls out there in the podcast world, thank you for giving us your attention, your ears, your heart today. We will catch you next time here on the Cosmic Love Antenna. But until then, we both love you very much, and we'll see you very soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, Meagher.